correctly, you need a simple majority to pass legislation, though for some other things it can be 2/3 majority if it's in the Senate. But you can see there Republicans just slightly hold, and in that one it is Democrats who have will have a majority. Never quite that simple, but thank you. So Joe Biden we already know something about Joe Biden because obviously he was vice president under Barack Obama's administration. And it already looks like a lot of familiar faces from that administration are coming into the Biden-Harris kind of setup. Biden is obviously extremely different to Donald Trump. Trump's very much about unilateralism, doing things all by himself, America first, etc. Where Biden clearly already is making it very clear that he intends to kind of kick off where he left off before under Barack Obama, with a kind of a multilateral approach to things. So bringing people on board to foreign policy. He's openly critical of Brexit. He wants to reinvigorate US-EU trade relations. Obviously, they were a bit soured with Donald Trump. He's also seeking to kind of build a global sort of coalition for kind of climate change. So it's a very different presidency to Donald Trump. So the key priorities for Biden and Harris is essentially what they outlined in the party platform. Doesn't necessarily include foreign policy directly, but COVID-19 response, as you'd expect, economic recovery, racial equality, and then climate change as again something, 4 key aims that were very much part of the campaign. But if we look deeper, we can see in the party platform, we can get quite a bit out of it on foreign policy, and it's actually pretty easy to interpret. So this is the Democratic Party platform. And I've just taken some key quotes on foreign policy from it. So Democrats believe a united, democratic and prosperous Europe is vital to the United States. We believe the transatlantic alliance is the ballast of our global influence. Ours is the largest economic relationship in the world, making up nearly half of global GDP. NATO is the world's most formidable military alliance. Together we stand as champions of universal rights and freedoms around the world. Transatlantic cooperation is crucial to addressing almost every global challenge we face. So very different now from Trump. We've got commitments to NATO that are obvious, but also a direct focus on Europe. And I think in the time I looked at the party platform, I did do a search, and I don't think I came across the terms England, United Kingdom, Great Britain, anything like that. So there's a key focus in the party platform on Europe and recommitment to NATO and kind of alliances and creating allies and friends abroad. Democrats will reinvigorate the transatlantic partnership to repair the damage of the Trump era and preempt the risks of broader structural divergence between the US and Europe. So it's very much about creating new connections and kind of tying back up old ones. We will look together with individual European countries and the European Union to counter threats to our democracies and enhance shared resilience against corruption and kleptocracy. We will support greater European integration. So that's a key point to kind of keep on board. Biden and Barack Obama previously are very interested in kind of the EU, European integration, and were very clear that they felt that Brexit was a mistake. They believe as well, as we can see here, in stronger defence capabilities through a kind of process of European integration, greater energy security. We will enhance our coordination and joint standard setting on technology, trade, investment, and will boost our post-COVID-19 economic recovery and reduce inequality. So here's a bit more detail now. Democrats will join our European partners in standing up against Russia, We will not allow Moscow to interfere in our democracies or chip away at our resolve. We will reaffirm America's commitment to NATO and defending our allies. We will maintain transatlantic support for Ukraine's reform efforts and its territorial integrity. Democrats will lower regional and global threats by reinforcing nuclear arms control. Obviously, if you remember, kind of Donald Trump got rid of the kind of the arms kind of agreement that on nuclear arms that had been made with Iran. It's likely that's going to be returned. We believe Europe is our natural partner in managing areas of competition with China, and we'll work to establish common priorities, strategies, and tools. And just as we came together to stand up to communism and respond to global terrorism, we will come together with Europe to confront the existential challenge of climate change. So you can see clearly the foreign policy threats that have been analysed are Russia, a commitment to the European Union and to NATO, and obviously China as the key foreign policy threats. There are also dangers with Turkey and its neo-Ottomanist policies as well. It hasn't seemed to come up there, but maybe that comes under NATO. But you can see they're clearly identifying the potential problems. Biden's been very clear then that as he says, I believe America is strongest when we work with our allies. It's how we keep this country safe, counter terrorism and extremism, control this pandemic, deal with the climate crisis, and so much more. So Biden is much more moderate, obviously, than Trump. We're not going to have this grandstanding, the political incorrectness in terms of tweets. And it's going to be a search for kind of friends and old friendships in terms of foreign policy, rather than it is going to be kind of confrontational. Even though whatever we say about Trump, he did have some foreign policy successes. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Biden was vice president when President Obama stated that the UK would be at the back of the queue for a trade deal in the event of Brexit. Like Obama, Biden is a well-known critic of Brexit. Also, Biden has said quite recently that we can't allow the Good Friday Agreement that brought peace to Northern Ireland to become a casualty of Brexit. And that's the key thing that we will come on to when I get to the British end of things. With firm focus on a domestic agenda, on that 4 criteria I showed you, one of Biden's advisors has supposedly claimed that the US-UK trade deal will not be a priority in the first 100 days of Biden's presidency. Biden also has very strong Irish Catholic roots and has made it clear that he will not sanction under any circumstances a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Obviously, that's what the Good Friday Agreement enshrines as North-South cooperation without a hard border. And obviously, it brought an end or hoped to bring an end to the Troubles. And in some shape or form to ensure, at least in terms of the border, that it would be a united island of Ireland, if that makes sense. So Biden said during the 2019, excuse my little mistake, that 9 should be a 0, 2019 general election, that Prime Minister Boris Johnson was a kind of physical and emotional clone of the president, as in Trump. Biden will also almost certainly remember Johnson's crass comment in an article for The Sun saying that perhaps Obama's part Kenyan ancestry could explain his dislike for the British Empire, for which Boris Johnson was roundly condemned. Another one of those sort of gaffes that Boris Johnson seems to be so prone to. It won't help either that Biden will surely remember that in the Telegraph in 2007, Johnson described Hillary Clinton as a sadistic mental health nurse. It's also not going to help, and again, it does show how error Boris Johnson is. when Johnson congratulated Biden, he sent him a tweet, but it was clear that the tweet had originally been written for Donald Trump, because the word Trump was in the background. It was faded, but you could see it in the background. And the colours on the actual tweet underneath that were faded were of kind of the Republican red rather than the Democratic blue. So a big kind of clumsy start to kind of the relationship, and a kind of a history there of kind of a little bit of bad blood. And certainly Boris Johnson isn't popular with a number of Biden's closest kind of advisors, particularly like Kamala Harris. So quite quickly, Biden has announced this kind of foreign policy team, many of whom, if not all actually, were all there under Barack Obama's administration, which I'll go through now. So we've had this announcement really quickly because we're still in the transition period, and it's still, Trump has kind of conceded, sort of. It's clear he's accepted it, but what he's up to is another thing. So in setting out his cabinet foreign policy and his national security advisors, Biden has appointed some very experienced colleagues who reflect continuity with the Obama-Biden administration previously to Trump. We've got John Kerry back, himself, who had a run at the presidency, who served as Secretary of State, or what we call kind of the Foreign Secretary between 2013 and 17. He's been named the Presidential Envoy for Climate. Jake Sullivan, who was National Security Advisor to Vice President Biden 2013 to 14, is now National Security Advisor to the President, or President-elect Biden. Alejandro Mayorkas, who was Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security 2013-16, has been appointed Secretary of Homeland Security. Avril Haines, who was Deputy National Security Advisor 2015 to 17, is now Director of National Intelligence. Linda Thomas Greenfield, who's got years and years of experience, who was previously Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, has been appointed Ambassador to the UN. Biden, most importantly, as well, has nominated Antony Blinken as Secretary of State. So Blinken served as National Security Advisor to Biden between 2009 and 2013. He was then Deputy National Security Advisor 2013 to 15 and Deputy Secretary of State under President Obama 2015 to 17. So got a long history of experience working with Biden. So Blinken's appointment is significant because also he's a staunch opponent of Brexit. He's already said that if he was ever in government, he would strive to keep Britain in the European Union. He also said this comment about Brexit: this is not just the dog that caught the car, this is the dog that caught the car and the car goes into reverse and runs over the dog. So very clear that he thinks Brexit is a dreadful mistake. So on 15th of September 2020, Eliot Engel, who current chair of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, and 3 other members of the House sent a letter to Boris Johnson warning that while they were strong supporters of the long-standing alliance between the US and the United Kingdom, and that they support the special relationship, they said that they were disturbed by reports about the government's efforts to undermine the Northern Ireland Protocol of the withdrawal agreement. So the withdrawal agreement that was agreed with the European Union in terms of the UK leaving. If true, we will stand by the position made clear by the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who just this month reiterated that the United States Congress will not support any free trade agreement between the United States and the United Kingdom if the UK fails to preserve the gains of the Good Friday Agreement. So I'm going to come to that in a second. In a tweet following up on that letter that was sent, Biden followed up by saying, we can't allow the Good Friday Agreement that brought peace to Northern Ireland to become a casualty of Brexit. Any trade deal between the US and UK must be contingent upon respect for the agreement and preventing the return of a hard border, period. So very clear that that is a red line. It's telling also that when Prime Minister Johnson called Biden to congratulate him on the presidential election victory, Biden, while he promised to strengthen the special relationship and redouble cooperation, he made sure to remind Johnson of his support for the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland. So clearly this isn't any form of grandstanding, it is a serious red line. So while the UK has already had 5 sets of talks with the US in terms of a trade deal, and there's a lot of speculation about that trade deal, what was previously in place, the Trade Promotion Authority, which could have fast-tracked negotiations, expired on the 1st of July. So it's very unlikely, unless that could potentially be extended, it's very unlikely that there would be any movement on a US-UK trade deal until Brexit and a legal version of Brexit along the lines of the withdrawal agreement agreed between the UK and the European Union is concluded. So until that moment, it looks like the US under Biden in particular will not be moving. So if we think about Brexit from the UK perspective, sorry, just going to have a quick sip of water. So the transition period that I'm sure everyone's heard of, that was agreed as part of the withdrawal agreement, is due to end on the 31st of December 2020. Any further extension to this period had to be agreed by July the 1st, 2020. Obviously, that has long since gone. So if no trade agreement is agreed with the EU by the end of the year, the UK will come out of the European Union and revert to World Trade Organization rules, given the UK will not be a member of the customs union, the single market, or we will have the fact that free movement will cease also. So the UK will go over to World Trade Organization rules. In preparation for the outcome, the EU has published a communication on readiness at the end of the transition period to kind of cover any scenario, as they say. While the UK has developed guidance on the border with the European Union importing and exporting goods and guidance on the Brexit transition, all of them, though, seem to assume that the Northern Ireland Protocol of the withdrawal agreement, meaning there cannot be the introduction of a hard border, all of them seem to assume that that protocol will still be there, will still be in use, whatever the outcome of kind of the negotiations with the EU. It's really unclear. So that's the guidance, and it is incredibly extensive, and there is a lot of grey areas that will confuse even the most kind of experienced of business people. Biden's concern, particularly about Brexit, is this internal market bill, which at current stage in Parliament is with the House of Lords on its 3rd reading. What's happened with that bill is that essentially the House of Lords have tried to take elements out of it, simply because of the assumption that if we break the withdrawal agreement, we are breaking international law. But already senior Conservatives have saying that they will simply put those elements straight back in. So in the event of no deal, this internal market bill is designed to ensure that aspects of the withdrawal agreement can be amended and changed to safeguard kind of frictionless trade between each state of the United Kingdom. So between England, Wales and Scotland, and also with Northern Ireland. But it's not quite that simple. The problem is that the withdrawal agreement and its Northern Ireland Protocol, as part of that agreement, Northern Ireland will continue to be subject to EU regulations on goods given it shares a border or will share a border with Ireland, who is an EU state, even if England, Wales and Scotland apply different criteria. So as part of Northern Ireland being part of the United Kingdom and then the wider European Union, there isn't an issue with the border because obviously Ireland is in the European Union. So the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, which enshrined an all-Ireland and a cross-border approach, isn't compromised. But when we leave the EU, if we leave without a deal, there's all sorts of questions about what will happen to that border. It will need to maybe potentially something become a hard kind of customs border with patrols, etc. The Trader Support Service is being put in place, but as I said, it assumes that the Northern Ireland protocol of the withdrawal agreement will be in place whatever happens. Whether that's because the government knows something we don't know and there is going to be a trade deal very imminently, I'm not sure, but this is the issue. The difficulty is with goods going from England, Wales and Scotland into Northern Ireland and vice versa. Because if England, Wales and Scotland diverge in terms of regulations on goods, but the goods coming into Northern Ireland are subject to EU regulations, then we've got a problem. So this means that if a free trade agreement cannot be agreed between the UK and the EU, frictionless trade of goods moving between Britain and Northern Ireland will be basically impossible. It's very difficult to see how on earth this will work. The issue then for critics of the internal market bill, including Biden, is that it allows for changes to the withdrawal agreement and compromises the clause in the withdrawal agreement that prohibits new border arrangements. Even the Northern Ireland Secretary, Brandon Lewis, who was a Brexiteer, has stated that this would break international law. The EU has even launched a legal challenge against the internal market bill, claiming it infringes on Article 258 about legal enforcement. And also, as set out in the withdrawal agreement, the internal market bill contradicts the withdrawal agreement and the fact that it says that the Court of Justice of the European Union shall have jurisdiction as provided for in this international treaty. So you can see why some people would say it breaks international law if the internal market bill goes through, which it is likely to. It's then a question if there is no deal between the UK and the EU, what is going to happen? It's very difficult to predict. In a recent phone call to Biden, the president of the European Council, Charles Michel, thanked the president-elect for his clear support regarding the implementation of the withdrawal agreement the EU concluded with the UK last year, further confirming the agreement preserves peace and stability in Ireland and fully respects the Good Friday Agreement. So the EU and the president-elect Biden are clearly in sync on this. They're clearly seeing eye to eye. So this is a big problem, I think, for Boris Johnson and David Frost and the other negotiators. Brexit talks are currently ongoing, but only in the last couple of days, the chief negotiator, the head of the UK task force, Michel Barnier, has said that if there is no immediate breakthrough in the negotiations, they could simply be called off by the end of the week. The other difficulty, even if you can get agreement, that will still have to go back for ratification amongst the EU member states. And trying to get all of this done before January is incredibly difficult, if not impossible. There's been hints as well about a potential kind of another delay, another extension to the transition period. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. There we go. Maybe things would have been simpler, at least for Boris Johnson and for Trump, if they could have continued their relationship. It's not clear exactly what they think of each other. They did have some kind of rough moments and then some other kind of more romantic moments, shall we say. So I've got kind of a multi-layered conclusion. all of it basically means that Boris Johnson's options are very limited. So if Biden remains true to his word, which it looks like he certainly is going to, a US-UK trade deal will first be dependent on a UK-EU trade deal and preservation of the Good Friday Agreement. On the other hand, Johnson doesn't have much room to manoeuvre because of the European Research Group in Parliament, who have recently said that they will not support any legislation in relation to a trade agreement with the EU that compromises, according to one anonymous Tory, UK sovereignty. So there's a sizable number of MPs who made up that European Research Group that are there and did cause plenty of trouble for Theresa May, and were there always kind of trying to force Boris Johnson to do what they felt was the right thing in relation to Brexit. It's not to mention as well that in the background, Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party, which is transforming itself into the new Reform Party, while it said its key focus will be a kind of an anti-lockdown approach in relation to COVID, Farage and the chairman, Richard Teese, have said they're going to be watching as well to make sure that Johnson doesn't sell us down the river over Brexit. Really, we've seen in the past how successful UKIP were at kind of pressurising the Tories towards kind of the Eurosceptics. And I think Farage, again, is hoping for more of the same, but we will see. Second part of the three-part conclusion, the National Audit Office has already said as well, very recently, that the UK's preparedness for the end of the transition period and the preparations to manage the border at the end of the transition remain very challenging and have continued to be significantly affected by the ongoing negotiations and wider political context and by the impact of COVID-19. The end of the transition period is unlike any previous EU exit deadline in that regardless of the outcome of negotiations of the future relationship between the EU and the UK, things are obviously going to have to change. So the government is planning supposedly for significant change at the border from 1st of January 2021. However, the National Audit Office said significant risk remains, in particular relation to the arrangements required with the Northern Ireland Protocol, and that fact that goods coming into Northern Ireland will need to meet EU regulations, as will goods going out, or they will be subject to potential tariffs. Final part of my three-part hat trick kind of conclusion. It won't have escaped Boris Johnson's attention. The Office of Budget Responsibility has said that a no-deal Brexit and having to switch to the WTO trading terms would reduce real gross domestic product by a further 2% just in 2021 alone. On top of the fact that they pointed out that COVID-19 has caused our economy to shrink 11% this year, the largest kind of shrinkage in 300 years. On top of their estimate that support for public services, households and businesses has cost the UK 280 billion, pushing the deficit to 394 billion, 19% of gross domestic product, the highest since the Second World War, and pushed debt above 100% of gross domestic product. Again, the highest since 1960. So some really alarming, stark kind of statistics to think about there for Boris Johnson, David Frost, and the other kind of Brexiteers who are hoping to get some kind of free trade agreement with the EU. But also, I do think that free trade agreement with the EU is going to have to be a precursor to any free trade agreement with the United States. And I do also think that Biden and Harris are looking in terms of globally, and they're thinking in terms of Europe, not necessarily in terms of the United Kingdom, Great Britain. They're seeing Europe as their kind of target to work with for economic cooperation and climate change and things similar. So that there's a lot to still happen here, and it's very, very difficult to predict. So I will stop there and hand back to Lottie and see if there's any questions, but thanks for listening.
Thank you ever so much, Luke, for the interesting lecture, and obviously something that's very relevant and current at the moment. We're just going to hang on just for a couple of minutes just to see if we get any individual questions. Just to let everyone know, everybody who's watching, we have recorded the lecture, and we will make that available to everybody kind of post lecture. So we'll be sending you an email with the details. So if you want on to your colleagues who will also be able to watch.
Has anyone got any questions? At the moment, there's none coming through, so we'll just wait a few more minutes. Okay, we've got a fascinating talk from Sean.
Thank you. Glad you came. Hopefully that means I covered every single eventuality if there's no questions.
Yep, that sounds...
I think that might be the case, Luke. Yeah. Hannah has just said thank you as well. Great lecture as always. So
Thanks, Hannah.
I suspect Hannah's possibly one of your students, Luke.
Yeah, the £10 in the post. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, great lecture. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think we all are worried about the economy. Or,
there is a question. Can you see that, Luke, as well?
Yeah, I'll just read out so everyone knows what I'm responding to. Do you think that there is anything to be said for party affiliation in accordance with the special relationship? Are Democrats or Republicans more invested in this, and how might this play out in the next few months? That's a difficult question to answer. To be honest, I don't think at the moment it's going to matter, simply because I know what you're saying, because of how close it is in the House and the Senate. It's very difficult to gauge what will happen and just how much legislation that can be got through by Biden. He might need to be a little bit like Trump. Actually, Trump was always called the president of the pen, having to sign executive orders. I don't think it really matters at this stage. I think what will matter is what the UK can offer. And I think if we haven't done a deal with the EU, it makes us less kind of viable and kind of exciting partner. And in particular, I think it's very clear for the Democrats, at least, that the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Good Friday Agreement are absolutely sacrosanct. So I'm not sure really how we get around that. I think Trump might have been much more likely to think outside the box and be less concerned about things like that. A lot of point has been made that the Obama administration maybe wasn't as pro-UK as Bush-Trump. I'm not so sure about that. I think Biden's got very close connections to Ireland, so naturally he's concerned about that, just as Trump had close connections to Scotland. But I think Obama was always a very good friend of the UK, really. I mean, it just depends whether you like him interfering in our politics. And I know some people were angry when he spoke out against Brexit. Rob has said, how important is the party balance in the Senate going to be in blocking and foreign policy ideas that the Biden administration has? Yeah, I think it is going to be important because of the way American politics work and the way legislation works. You need to get a majority in both houses, and you've still got the Supreme Court, you've still got presidential oversight. So it is going to be difficult, and I think you're always going to have that now in American politics. But as I say, President Trump got an awful lot through executive orders. I used to kind of, sometimes when I did sessions, you had the list of all these executive orders of the pen, and it was well into its hundreds. One of the last times I looked at it. Do you think Biden's Irish ancestry has had an influence on foreign policy regarding Brexit? I think it has. I think there is a connection there, but I suspect that is also important anyway. In terms, it's very clear that Biden wants to build alliances and to build friendship and to be very moderate in foreign policy. So I think it fits hand in hand. How do you think Biden will be able to handle the progressive left within the Democratic Party? That keeps coming up, and there's a lot of conspiracy theories that Kamala Harris will have to step in at some point. I think that very close friendship, I can't see that being a problem really. And Kamala Harris does tap into a huge demographic that's very progressive in the United States, very angry on issues to do with racial inequality. And I think also Biden's kind of choices so far of cabinet, I think we've got one who is of Cuban ancestry and was an immigrant from an immigrant family. We've got the first kind of black vice president in Kamala Harris, who has Indian and Jamaican ancestry. A number of other appointments of kind of setting kind of new firsts in terms of inclusivity. Good vice president pick, balanced kind of ticket. Yeah, I think it does work. You've got moderate sort of liberal along with kind of left sort of centre as well, with some little bit more radical elements, but certainly a progressive social justice, racial equality, domestic agenda is the way I see it going forward. Very, very different to Trump's kind of divisive version of politics and activation of kind of alternative right politics and white supremacist politics, emphasis on law and order in policing and things. I think all of those things are going to go, but I do think there's going to be a lot of turmoil, as there already is in the process.
Luke, it was just a question from Grace about, do you think Biden's Irish ancestry has had an influence on his foreign policy regarding Brexit?
Oh, I thought I'd answered that one. Yeah, I think his ancestry gives him a personal link to Ireland and that importance of the Good Friday Agreement in maintaining the chance of peace and not having a hard border and a united Ireland. But at the same time, I think it's very clear that he is an alliance builder, somebody who's looking for friendship to bring people on board as part of that climate change initiative, as part of having a moderate foreign policy that looks to build friendships through moderation. Biden says he wants to join the Paris Climate Change Agreement in the first week of his presidency. Yeah, because John Kerry was actually involved in that, and I think that appointment is really important. You can see the logic of all these appointments. Will it be like an executive agreement due to 2/3-party majority needed in Senate to pass a treaty? That's a good question, and the answer to that is I don't know. But yeah, to pass treaties and things might be more difficult. Do you think Donald Trump's persistent presence over the next 4 years might tear apart the Republican Party and erode its chances of re-election in 2024? Well, he actually won the presidency through a kind of as a wrecking ball, didn't he? And upset a lot of people in the process. And I think that appealed to a lot of his supporters. Those of you here from kind of the University of Worcester will know when we kind of teach Trump his incorrectness and his misogyny, his sexism, his racism, his Islamophobia. While most people are horrified, it did actually appeal to a number of his kind of supporters, but also there were people who kind of liked Trump's economic policies and business-friendly policies, who kind of were willing to just say, well, we don't like him, but we'll go with it because it's the best for the United States. Mike has said, what exactly does the special relationship mean nowadays? And when it was first mentioned in US-UK relations, it's dependent on personalities. Thatcher, Reagan, Bush, Blair. No, it doesn't go together, does it, Biden, Johnson? That just does not have a ring to it. I think Thatcher and Reagan shared similar backgrounds in the sense they both believed in kind of new right, liberal, conservative versions of kind of economy and politics and laissez-faire and things. Bush and Blair obviously were strange sort of bedfellows, but very close. Biden and Johnson are very different, particularly in terms of Brexit, particularly in terms of Johnson's crass language and the problem making kind of terrible kind of gaffes and using things like racist and sexist language. Do you think Biden will think the UK is weaker and less likely to be favourable in a trade deal outside the EU? Yes, definitely. I don't think the UK is such an attractive proposition for the US when it's not part of Europe. Generally, even sometimes kind of with Donald Trump, it's much easier to deal with the European Union as a bloc with the UK, and the UK acts like a mouthpiece for the United States into kind of the European Union. So I think that is going to be a problem. Do you think the arms trade is also a factor, e.g. UK buying US military equipment rather than buying as part of a European consortium? I don't know on that one. We've supposedly got £16.9 billion going to be injected into the military. What we'll be spending it on, I don't know, and where the money's coming from, because even the generals don't know where the money's coming from. Luke, how important are the 2022 midterms for Biden? Should he lose the House and become a lame duck? Should the UK government look to potential Republican candidates for the next election? Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush, etc. I think it's too far ahead. I think the worst thing you can do in politics now is predict anything. Nobody could predict Brexit, Donald Trump. There are so many things now that you can't predict. So I wouldn't like to predict. I don't think that will happen. I think it'll be very close again at the midterms, and then it's a long way off. But I think Trump's already hinting that he would stand again in kind of the next election if he was able to do that. Rob has said, will Biden likely take a less hostile stance towards NATO contributions for other members? Many people split ticket vote in the midterm, so it's hard to predict. I think Biden has already made it clear that he does support NATO, and I suspect he will not be so kind of loud and critical as Trump was about kind of nations not paying their full contribution when the US was paying over the odds. I think Biden will be much more conciliatory, and I think Biden really intends to reinvigorate the kind of NATO and a relationship with its members. So I think that's something to watch for. But if you look at all the policy information so far, it's clear that's where it's heading.
Okay, I think that sort of brings things nicely to a close. I'll just kind of finish off just by saying, obviously, Luke, thank you so much again. We hope that everybody has enjoyed today's session. Obviously, if you'd like any further information about University of Centre Halesowen or studying higher education at Halesowen College and the University of Worcester, then you can contact the Community Hub Assistant, Lottie Summers. She is available at lsummers@halesowen.ac.uk. And we'll also send out an email soon asking for feedback on today's session. We can also add you to our mailing list if you would like. And just let you know that the next month's lecture is on coronavirus and consumer behaviour. So that will be in December, and we'll be sending out some promotional information. So like I said, again, thank you very much to the audience for joining. Thank you again, Luke. Really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, everyone. It was great to have you all in. I hope you have a good day, and make sure you stay safe and take care. If ever you want to get in touch about kind of politics or coming to the university, please do drop me an email. All you have to do is go onto our main website, and you can find all kind of the staff email addresses and all about our courses. So thanks for listening, and thanks for coming today.
Great. Thanks ever so much, everybody, and good afternoon.